Hi, and welcome to the Power of Connection and Biz Show. I'm Kimberly Lane, your executive leadership and team engagement coach, consultant, best-selling author, and your host. Today, we have an intriguing guest. She has been a trusted coach and mentor to executives, business owners, and service professionals for over 22 years. Her clients value her focus on optimizing personal and team performance, goal setting and accountability, and achieving key management practices that grow and sustain profitability. She's especially skilled in helping leaders understand how to apply cognitive diversity in order to thrive in uncertain times, the very times that we're going through now. Some of her coaching clients include Toyota, J&J, and Warner Brothers, just to name a few. Today, we're here to talk about her book, The Integrative Leader, which displays her expertise in cognitive diversity. Please welcome our wonderful guest, Sonia Jante. Hey, Sonia.
Hi, Kimberly. How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
It's always great to have you and to kind of see what you're up to and your latest adventures and endeavors. And I'm really excited about your book. I think embracing the entire whole brain thinking, I think, is something that we really need in the world today, and especially from a leadership coaching perspective. So I'm excited to kind of dive into it. Just a basic question that I think everyone wants to know is, why did you write this book? What inspired you?
Well, what inspired me was that the circumstances under which, so I wrote this book when COVID happened and we were all shut down, if you will. And having been an executive coach and an executive for many decades, I knew that the kinds of decisions made to manage this situation were so different from what had ever happened before that I knew, in a sense, it was like a trial run. I knew that the circumstances would lead to a lot of uncertainty in the future. And all I could think of is leaders need a new playbook. They need something that's going to help them to just deal with the uncertainty that they're going to be facing moving forward. So that was what inspired me to write the book. And, you know, when you write your final chapter and your final thoughts, and I kept saying at the time, which I finished it like in August of 2020, and I just kept saying, boy, the kinds of circumstances that leaders will be facing for the next 6 to 18 months is full of uncertainty. I didn't anticipate that it would be this uncertain, that so many things would go in so many different ways. And so all I could think of was I've had the good fortune to, over the years, perfect on a model that I have proven it with other leaders who were going through many changes in their circumstances, whether they were moving into a new job, whether they were bringing on new people into their team, whether they were being part of a merger or an acquisition. It didn't matter what it was. And depending on what function they were in, there was a certain focus and a certain return that they were going to be looking at. And so I thought it's time to document them up. So
Mm.
that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah, wonderful. So for those that really don't understand the term whole brain thinking, and just to kind of give some perspective, how would you say leadership might have been showing up, say, you know, before COVID, if you will? Was it just solely right brain? Was it solely left brain? And versus the nuance you're trying to describe now, is that
Yeah.
the balance of the two? It's, so
Yeah.
just kind of help shape where we
Mhm.
were, where you're trying to take us from, right brain, left brain, whole brain, all that wonderful
Okay.
stuff.
So I guess what I'll say to you is, in general, when people do studies, and there's been quite a few, like Accenture and other companies have done the research. When you look at leadership at the very top of an organization, at a C level, CEOs, CFOs, they tend to have come from the disciplines that we would put more in the
Hmm.
left brain kind of category. So it's finance, it's technical areas. And so I would say that there is a natural inclination, because they tend to lead, to, as you move in the organization, to be structuring your thinking along the lines of reporting to them that have to do with answering, what's the return on
Right.
investment, how are we going to get things done, that kind of thing. And then when you look at there's certain specific functions in certain specific areas across most companies they tend to be more right brain dominant. So if you're looking at companies that are very creative or having to do a lot of things that have to do with innovation, that really taps into thinking outside of the box. I have a leader that I've worked with for a number of years, and he's quite strong in that right brain, even though he's an engineer. And literally after any meeting that we've been discussing options, he turns to everybody else. He goes, well, what else could it mean? What else could we do? And that's very right brain, as well as our social interactions, what people call the soft skills. So it's a lot about the interpersonal connections. And one of the things that I think is happening more and more is people are realizing that if you are able to marry good, strong, concise communication, clarity of thought in terms of like what is the bottom line,
Right.
but and you have good skills with people, then you're going to be needed more often. And so there was a lot of studies that I looked at that had to do with in terms of the future, if we're going to have leaders that optimize returns, they have to be whole brain thinkers. They have to be able to integrate all aspects of what it requires to really manage the business.
So you're saying in the past, it was mostly right brain, which was more just, strategic, financial, um, uh,
More left brain.
right.
There was a strong
Sorry. Yeah.
emphasis,
Yep.
even in the curriculum in schools for a long
Right.
time. It was very much left brain oriented. It was considered that when you were taking English or literature or something like that, that was as close to right brain as you could get.
Right. Exactly. Right. And now you're suggesting that the need for great communication skills, interpersonal relationships, trust building, those kind of things, empathy are kind of part of the right brain of integrating between the left and the right. Is that kind of from what was the gap?
Yeah,
Is that
that's exactly right. I mean, if you look today now, I mean, even decisions and choices that I saw people make at the time when the pandemic unfolded, people were making a lot of right brain decisions. In other words, do I trust your brand? Do I perceive that you are supportive of inclusion? Do I perceive that you actually, walk your talk? So things suddenly got to the point where when there is, a dramatic situation, we get personal. And in that personal place, we're looking at our heart, we're looking at our gut, we're looking at how do I make decisions that are just not about the mind. And that's a lot of where the right brain tends to go.
Yep. 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 Very good. Very good. So you've mentioned your model. So is there a way to kind of talk about the model and how does it grow cognitive diversity, would you say?
Sure. So I'm going to try to hold up an image of the model. We're not going to go through it in depth, but I basically designed it in such a way that as we're going through all the different parts of answering or addressing a problem, it looked at every single one of the questions that we normally address when solving a problem. And then what is the return related to that? So just to give an example, it's like, so where are we in the business? Where are we right now? Well, that's return on situational awareness. Are we clear about where we are and how are we going to define that? And there's a lot of processes that consultants and coaches can bring to the table. What is the return on investment? That's more the left brain. Where is more of an integrated brain kind of thing? Who, return on interpersonal interaction. So I was trying to tap all the different questions. So the who, what, where, when, why, and who, what, when, where, and how. I would say that when I meet leaders who stay very close to the how, they tend to be more comfortable micromanaging because they don't allow for the people that they are quote unquote uploading or delegating their work to come up with their own how. And yet that's fundamental for us to be able to start growing in our career and allowing people to flourish.
Yeah, we have to be able to delegate if we're going to be achieving higher goals. Definitely. So it has to become a comfort level on that as well. So
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
What would you say you would advise leaders to focus on now to be more effective, given this huge amount of uncertainty that existed during the pandemic and even now still moving forward?
So something that I used to focus with leaders was, make sure that you're minding your store, you're minding your division, you're minding your group. I'm now giving the advice that's start with the big picture. Because for three reasons. One is there are so many changes happening that if you're not aware of changes that are, if you will, adjacent to you or affecting your industry, you may come up with a very good plan, but it won't play because there's all the other changes that have happened. So I am asking them to start with the big picture, do more scenario planning where you're collaborating and cooperating with other groups that think differently and other places in the business that maybe, you have a certain amount of interaction because they're so far down the path, because there's decisions you're making today that could affect them down the path
Right.
that before you would not have had to think about. So it really is about how are you going to optimize returns on your time and on your investment by being able to have more people in the room. You're going to have to include more thoughts or more, at least, challenges and views so that you can arrive at, okay, what are we solving for? I've been conducting 360s a lot since the pandemic and since we're all going back to work. And one of the patterns that I'm finding of leaders that people, even if they've been there for only a year and a half, that people are very comfortable with and are looking forward to working with them longer, is they say, what that person does is that person knows how to focus on the important things. And they take a complex subject and they're able to put it into simple forms for all of us to know what we're really solving for. So people know how often, somebody gets an idea and then they get sidetracked to go over here and sidetracked to go over there, and you only have 24 hours in the day.
Right.
And so now they're saying, so if you have somebody that is a big picture thinker, that understands to ask the questions along the path, ideally in a room with other people where everybody's coming to the same conclusion, you're now optimizing your ability to make the right choice and have results faster because you can implement faster.
Yep. I think it's pretty much impossible for leaders to lead solo. There's too much information. There's too much fast pace of making decisions to account for all the options, to account for all the risks, to account for all the possibilities. You really need more people in the room. I think that's a really, really valid point.
Well, the other thing, just one last thing that I do want to add to that, because we are living at times when there's certain generational shifts in terms of who's moving up in the organization, is I think so the other part that I go is, so let's talk about succession planning. Before, you may have just thought of one person as your successor, and you may have been focused on just mentoring that individual. And because there's so many things at stake, you might want to have a couple of people that you consider to be successors and put them through a similar kind of program. At the very least, you're going to expand the abilities of your team. So that's the other thing I look at. Big picture and succession planning really matters.
Good topics. So you mentioned teams. So I think that's a good way to segue now. How would you say whole brain thinking looks when you're looking at a team? How can you differentiate a team that's using whole brain thinking versus one that's not?
Well, the first thing is they are diverse. They don't all look the same. They don't all think the same.
Group think, yeah.
So it blends right into the initiative and the focus that we have on inclusion. The other thing that I would say is they're very resilient. They have the capacity to know that somebody else in the room or together, somebody can say, I think it looks like that, or I think it feels like that. And so it's like they're on this journey of discovery, of coming up with different options. So the likelihood that when you have that kind of a team, you're not stuck, no matter what the problem is, and we need that. I mean, this is, if anything right now is the time to be resilient, and probably having new approaches to any situation becomes then something that is embedded in the culture, and everybody else is doing that. So you have, it's like you have options. And when people one of the things I think about is we need to have people feel a little bit more connected and a little bit more accountable and a little bit more empowered. And that comes from knowing you have options. So that's what I would say really helps build a strong, resilient team.
Yeah, and then just the freedom for everybody to willingly express their opinion. I'm going to take that back again. So that I think that brings another point in that creating a team where they're willing and feel comfortable enough to express their opinions, whether they agree with the group or not, to push back, to challenge, right, to kind of come at things from a total different angle, whether it's in a total part of their brain from a total creativity perspective or more from a financial perspective, but just really embracing that diversity, if you will, as you mentioned, is just really a key part of that whole brain thinking. Is there anything? Go ahead.
What happens is we get to appreciate others that are that way because they identify trends and patterns quicker. And so by default, it's like, oh, like if you have people from different generations who are looking at different places for information and they come together and this is what we're going to solve for. And they can say, having looked at this, this, and this, I see this trend. The other person says, oh, I've noticed this trend. And suddenly in that moment, there's something where everybody goes, oh, now we're more informed. One of the leaders that I formerly coached now is working at Converse. And you think, oh, that's sneakers. Yeah, it's sports. Yeah, it's a brand that's been around for a long time. Well, this person is a diverse leader. And the very first thing that she did was go in there and figure out how are we going to now collaborate and cooperate with other diverse leaders and invent new things. So the opportunities for the brand have gone into a variety of different directions. I don't know that you would have thought that 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's almost talking with other leaders from other industries, not just retail, right? Not just sneakers, right? Other industries. I know a lot when I'm working with healthcare executives, they're pulling in other industries just to add some kind of different way of looking at something, right? Versus the way they've been doing it traditionally for decades, right? So, what else on your book do you want to highlight for our guest today?
Well, what I did with every chapter was I used a story of a leader that represented a successful version of mastering that part of the whole brain thinking. So there is a chapter on a leader that came up the finance world that was very good about return on investment and what that did for her career, where she went from a particular position in a company that was like in the mid 70s in the Fortune 500 to a company that was in the top 5. So there was things that happened for these people as they started mastering the model that then allowed us to really, know there was another leader on in terms of return on interpersonal interaction. And she had been coming up through a left brain oriented thing, which was IT. And the organization came to a time where they wanted now to integrate all of the organization under one leader. Before they had like their different stovepipes, if you will. And suddenly managing the whole group meant that she was going to have to establish brand new relationships with more than half of the organization. And it was like, how'd she go about doing that? And, what was the premise that she used? So the book is filled with, here's, when you look at this side of the brain and you're answering this question, then we give you an actual story. And then we give you what kind of a tool that I was using, whether it came from the Harvard Business Review, from some established organization where people can now have the whole enchilada together.
Yeah, as we know, stories are very effective because it allows us to be able to relate to what somebody's going through, right? So I'm sure many leaders have had to, especially through this pandemic, whether they're coming back to work or are being assigned new teams or new divisions or things are merging together. So I think that's a really great, valid point in that chapter. And I guess you have one for every single chapter. So it's a great example from a learning perspective. Any other thoughts you wish to leave with our guests?
Well, what is it that Betty Davis did in one of her movies? Buckle up, it's going to be a bumpy ride.
Right.
I think that what we need to do is be able to recognize that it's going to be bumpy. and we don't have to have all the answers. But the other thing that I am advising leaders, and I think it's very important, is we really have to take the time to step away from things and take a vacation, take a holiday, identify what actually changes your channel. Because these are times in which the stress can be very tough on your body, on your relationships, on your situation. And in terms of life, we have to make it fulfilling, and it requires all aspects of our lives. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm encouraging leaders.
Yes, definitely. And it's because I think too, when we continue to repeat our days, especially when they're stressful, I don't know that we're truly using the whole brain thinking. And I think just stepping away from that, from a vacation, even I think somebody said taking 20 minutes walk in nature is like an hour's worth of meditation. So to help you kind of reframe what your perspective is and come in, look at things in a different way as far as solving problems. But I think it also helps you encompass that whole brain thinking that you're talking about today. So wonderful, Sonia. So I'd like to thank the audience for joining us today. If you like today's show, I encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, The Power of Connection in Biz. I would also like to thank Sonia for sharing your expertise on cognitive diversity, and to encourage our audience to please pick up Sonia's book, Integrative Leader, and you can find it on Amazon and also on Audible. Until next time, bye for now. Thanks for joining the Power of Connection in Biz show.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to